A boy, 15 years old, a mountain, and 300 men who searched for 28 days. Nothing. No blood, no footprints, no clothing, no body, as if the mountain swallowed him whole. Before I tell you what happened on that mountain, I need you to understand something. This is not a story from a movie. This is not a legend. This happened in Brazil in 1985, and it remains one of the most disturbing unsolved disappearances in the entire world. A case so mysterious that major international magazine ranked it as the third greatest disappearance of the planet. A case that generated 2 books, a Netflix podcast, a documentary series, and decades of investigations that led absolutely nowhere. And at the center of it all, a 15-year-old boy who simply ceased to exist. His name was Marco Aurelio Bezerra Bosaja Simon. He was born on January 16th, 1970, in São Paulo, Brazil. He was the kind of boy every parent hopes to raise: disciplined, responsible, brave. He had been a Boy Scout since he was young, and he took it seriously. He earned his ranks. He followed the rules. He was always the first one to help when someone was in trouble. He had an identical twin brother named Marco Antonio. The two of them were so physically identical that even their closest friends regularly confused them. Same face, same voice, same laugh. 2 boys who had spent every single day of their lives together since the moment they were born. And in the first week of June 1985, Marco Antonio got sick. A simple illness, nothing serious. But it meant he couldn't join the trip. That detail will haunt you until the very last second of this video. On June 7th, 1985, Marco Aurelio set off with 4 fellow scouts and their group leader. The leader's name was Juan Bernabeu Céspedes, a Spanish man in his mid-30s who had been running the Olivetano scout group in São Paulo for years. He was respected, experienced, trusted by the parents of every boy in that group. Their destination was Pico dos Marins, a 2,420-meter peak sitting on the border between the states of São Paulo and Minas Gerais, deep in the Serra da Mantiqueira mountain range. It was considered a challenging but manageable climb. The kind of mountain that experienced scouts could handle on a weekend trip. It should have been routine. But before they even began climbing, Juan made a series of decisions that have never been explained. Decision number 1. The scout group's leadership had previously agreed that the climb to Pico dos Marins would only be attempted with a professional local guide. They had arranged a man named Afonso Gizavia, a local farmer who had lived at the base of that mountain his entire life and had guided dozens of groups up its trails for over 30 years. He knew every rock, every shortcut, every dangerous spot. He'd already prepared food for the group. He was ready to go. Juan dismissed him, said he had heard that Afonso wouldn't have time. When police later interviewed Afonso and his wife, both of them denied it completely. Afonso said he was ready and waiting. His wife confirmed it. The food was prepared. Juan simply lied, and nobody questioned him. Decision number 2. On the very same day, another experienced scout group arrived at the base of the mountain with the same goal of climbing Pico dos Marins. Their leader, a man named Jose Wilson, personally invited Juan's group to climb together. More people, more experience, more safety. A simple and logical decision that any responsible leader would accept. Juan refused. He said his group would start later. Why would a man in charge of 4 teenage boys refuse professional guidance and refuse to climb with an experienced group? Nobody's ever been able to answer that question. June 8th, 1985. The group begins climbing at 8 in the morning. And this is where things get strange immediately. A climb that experienced guides say should take no more than an hour and a half by the normal marked trail took Juan's group 6 full hours. 6 hours. They got lost on the way up on a marked trail. With an experienced leader, they finally reached the upper section of the mountain by early afternoon. And that is when Osvaldo, one of the scouts, injured his knee. The group stopped. They were at approximately 1,700 meters altitude, still some distance from the peak. Juan assessed the situation. They couldn't carry Osvaldo easily. They needed to get back down. And that is when Marco Aurelio did what he always did. He volunteered. He offered to go ahead of the group, descend the mountain faster, and find help at the base camp as quickly as possible. Juan authorized it. He walked with Marco approximately 100 meters down the trail, pointed him in the direction of the descent, and turned back to the others. Before leaving, Marco was given 3 items: a whistle to signal his location if he got lost, a knife for safety, and a piece of chalk to mark the rocks along the way with the number 240, the identification code of the Olivetano scout group, so the others could follow his exact path. 15 minutes after they separated, Juan looked down the trail ahead of him. Marco Aurelio was gone. The group descended slowly, following the chalk markings on the rocks. They found 3 marks, then 4, then they reached a fork in the trail. Marco had gone left. Juan decided to go right, claiming the 2 paths would eventually meet. They never did. The group ended up lost and didn't reach the base camp until the early hours of the following morning. When they finally arrived, everyone expected to find Marco sleeping inside his tent. He had left hours before them. He should have been there long before they were. But what they found was only his backpack, sitting outside the tent, alone in the dark. No Marco. And here is the detail that stops every single investigator cold. That same afternoon, while Marco was somewhere on that mountain, between 18 and 23 other people were also descending Pico dos Marins. 2 separate groups of tourists and locals, totaling nearly 24 people, came down from that same mountain on that same afternoon, on those same trails. Not one of them saw Marco Aurelio. Not one of them heard a whistle. Not one of them found a single chalk mark on the rocks. A boy with a whistle, a knife, and a piece of chalk, descending a mountain in broad daylight, surrounded by 24 other people on the same trails. And nobody saw him. Juan finally called Marco's father, Ivo Seaman, at 10:45 that night. When Ivo heard his son was missing on a mountain, something changed in him permanently. He made phone calls. He called everyone he knew. And by the next morning, the largest search operation that region of Brazil had ever seen was already being assembled. Over 300 people participated in the search over 28 days. Military police, army infantry battalions from the nearby city of Lorena, soldiers from the Special Operations Command, 6 elite alpinists from the Agulhas Negras Military Academy, 2 military helicopters, an airplane sent personally by the state governor, Franco Montoro, spelunkers, professional trackers with trained search dogs, and when conventional means came up empty, Ivo Seaman tried everything else: psychics, clairvoyants, mediums, a man who claimed he could communicate with extraterrestrials through telepathy. Ivo Seaman was a desperate father. He would try anything. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a piece of clothing, not a single trace of a 15-year-old boy on a mountain that had just been searched by 300 people for nearly a month. But on the third day of the search, something happened that two detectives found deeply suspicious. A massive fire broke out across the slopes of Pico dos Marins. Detectives George, Henry, and Biolin were on site watching it happen, and they immediately questioned whether the fire had been set deliberately. Their reason was simple and chilling. That day, the third day of the search, was supposed to be their very first day working actively on the Marco Aurelio case. Someone had started a fire on the mountain on the exact day the most experienced detectives were arriving to investigate. Someone did not want them to find that boy. But the most disturbing part of this entire story, the moment that has haunted investigators and families and ufologists for nearly 40 years, happened on the second night of the search. The scouts and Juan decided to sleep near the area of the disappearance. It was cold and dark, dense forest surrounding them on all sides. They were settling in for the night when it happened. They heard a scream coming from the forest, loud and clear. Everyone froze, and then, seconds after the scream, came a second sound. A whistle. Every single person there knew what that meant. Marco Aurelio had a whistle. It was standard scout equipment. It was how they signaled for help when lost in the wilderness. They all ran toward the sound, Juan in front, the others behind. They crashed through the dark forest, shouting Marco's name over and over. And then they saw it. 3 flashes of blue light, pulsing between the trees, lighting up and going dark. 1, 2, 3 times. The blue light illuminated the entire forest around it for a brief moment each time, casting long, cold shadows through the trees, and then vanishing completely. They screamed, they blew their whistles, they ran directly toward the light. Total silence. The light was gone. The whistle had stopped. The scream never came again. And the forest was dark and empty and silent, as if nothing had ever happened there at all. Now here is where the story takes a turn that most people don't know about. The blue light appeared to be emanating from the direction of a small shack deep in the woods. Juan walked toward it alone. He found the shack. He knocked on the door. A woman answered. She refused to let him inside. She said she hadn't seen any boy, and she closed the door in his face. Juan walked back to the campsite without saying another word, and he never once mentioned that woman or that shack to the police investigators. According to rumors that circulated among local residents for years afterward, that woman was a member of a secretive cult that operated in those mountains, a group known locally as the Blue Butterfly. Police never investigated her, never found her, never looked for the shack. That entire lead simply disappeared, just like Marco Aurelio. A police detective in the official investigation file formally raised the hypothesis of extraterrestrial involvement. He noted that the Pico dos Marins region was considered by local people to have unusually strong magnetic properties, and researchers who studied the case later pointed out something extraordinary. Just 45 kilometers away from that mountain, exactly 1 year before Marco vanished, another man had reported being attacked by a large oval ball of blue light that descended slowly from the sky and came within half a meter of the ground before he managed to flee on his bicycle. The same mountain range, the same type of light, 1 year apart. Now, there is another layer to this case that most people overlook. The behavior of Juan Bernabeo Céspedes after the disappearance raised serious red flags for investigators. He refused the local guide. He refused to climb with the other group. He got lost on a marked trail for 6 hours. He left a 15-year-old boy alone on a mountain with no adult supervision. When Marco didn't arrive at camp, he waited until the following morning to search alone for 5 hours before finally calling the family. When he returned to the base, he did not go to Afonso Xavier's house, which was only 50 meters away, to ask if Marco had passed by. He never explained why. When police later questioned the scouts separately, one of them, Osvaldo Lobero, gave a controversial statement suggesting Juan may have had criminal motives. Police began investigating whether Juan had abused Marco and killed him to cover it up. Juan agreed to take a lie detector test, but on the day of the test, the supervising detective declared that Juan had been subjected to psychological pressure beforehand and that the results could be compromised. Investigators later alleged that the Brazilian Scout organization had intervened behind the scenes to protect Juan and the reputation of the scouting institution. The test results were never made public. And then there is the story of the bus driver. During the weeks following the disappearance, as posters of Marco Aurelio spread across the region, a bus driver came forward to police with a statement. He said he had given a ride to a disoriented young boy near the mountain, whose physical description matched Marco Aurelio exactly. Police decided to test the credibility of this witness in a remarkable way. Without telling the bus driver anything, they brought Marco Aurelio's identical twin brother, into the police station and had him enter the room where the bus driver was waiting. The driver looked at him and said without hesitation, "That is the boy I gave a ride to." Whether that boy was truly Marco Aurelio, or whether the driver had simply seen Marco Antonio himself at some point and confused the memory, was never determined, but the testimony was never disproven either. In 2021, nearly 4 decades after Marco vanished, the case was officially reopened. Advanced drones, equipped with German-made detection technology, flew over the mountain and identified several locations that sensors suggested might contain human remains. Police excavated a house in the area of Piquet, following a specific tip about where a body may have been buried. They found nothing. The case became a podcast, a documentary series, 2 investigative books. The magazine Go Outside ranked it as the 3rd greatest disappearance in the world. But in the middle of all of that, there is a man who wakes up every single day, looks in the mirror, and sees the face of the brother who never came home. Marco Antonio, the twin who stayed home because he was sick. Marco Aurelio. Simon would be 56 years old today. His family never stopped looking. The blue lights were never explained. The woman in the shack was never found. The fire was never investigated. The cult was never identified. And a boy who entered a Brazilian mountain on June 8th, 1985, never came home. What do you think happened to Marco Aurelio? Tell me in the comments below, and if this story gave you chills, subscribe to this channel, because Brazil has many more stories like this one, stories the world needs to know.